the United States wants to drive their economy from a digital economy perspective, and it's tied into national security. And in Canada, that's going to need to be our future as well.
Welcome back, everyone, to another electrifying episode of Tank Talks. I'm your host, Matt Cohen, and joining me as always is the one and only John Ruffalo. Get ready as we dive headfirst into the hottest news and most exciting headlines at the intersection of business, innovation, and politics. Welcome back to the Tank, John. Is your head spinning or what?
Wow. It's like the Blitzkrieg.
Oh my God. The Blitzkrieg of news coming out. I mean, we are recording this on Tuesday, January 21st, the first official day of Trump in office. But in his first half day, there is a lot of things happening. So let's start off first with the inauguration. So this is Trump's second term inauguration. And it was very noticeably different, the people that were up on stage front and center, than there was from the prior inauguration that he had in 2017. So we are talking about the top tech CEOs right there beside everyone from his family and friends, and then all the other prior presidents and their spouses. So you got CEOs like Tim Cook from Apple, Sundar from Alphabet, Mark Zuckerberg, obviously from Meta, and Jeff Bezos from Amazon, as well as obviously Elon Musk, herding them all together, seeing front row and center. Notably, though, TikTok CEO was there, even though seated further back, but Microsoft CEO was not there. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the one that I thought was most amusing, Sam Altman was in the overflow room.
Right.
That feels like it's got Elon's fingerprints all over that one.
All over it.
So there was like an amphitheater that's attached in the overflow, so you're not in the actual rotunda. So the people that have high influence but are not in the inner circle were pushed out, as were politicians like Ron DeSantis and some other folks. So I just thought it was amusing. Boy, did they ever make it really clear who's holding the power in the United States.
Absolutely. I mean, the conversations were around how every tech figure had to contribute at least $1 million each personally or through a corporate fund towards the inauguration ceremony. Who knows how much more they donated.
Right.
But I did have to say the rotunda appeal was much nicer than this whole grandiose outdoor inauguration that we're used to seeing. And I think it aligns perfectly with Doge, actually. It's sort of like, we don't need to spend all this government money that we don't have on this one celebration. Let's do it more efficiently and let's get back to work. And talking about getting back to work, I mean, in his first half day in office, Trump had signed a series of executive orders focusing on a lot of key issues like immigration, energy policy, obviously Doge and government operations and more. But just to recap some of the things he did while answering 45 minutes of peppered media questions, I must say, was quite impressive. He was just rolling off the cuff on all these conversations while signing these executive orders. Let's just go through a few of them, John, so the audience can catch up. So he signed the Declaration of National Emergency at the southern border, basically enabling military resources for the border enforcement, including deploying troops to the border, which he said. He ended the catch and release, reinstatement of remain in Mexico policy. The big one, ending birthright citizenship, which apparently is the only country in the world to offer that.
Yes.
Where people would either be having their kids born there, either traveling or on vacation, just to get the American citizenship, but the parents don't have it.
Right.
That was something that was obviously very controversial.
As long as the parents, unless the parents were there legally.
Exactly.
It doesn't apply.
Exactly. Now, the big ones, obviously, on the energy environmental side, withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement. Trump said this many times he would. And also the declaration of the national energy emergency to fast-track permits for new fossil fuel infrastructure, as well as boosting domestic energy production. Now, the big ones on the Doge side, federal hiring freeze, except for positions related to immigration enforcement and national security and public safety. The big one, return to office, ordering all federal workers to return to office in person or quit, something I believe we should definitely be doing here in Canada.
Yes.
And the repeal of the Biden-era executive actions. So basically, we're sending 78 executive orders from the Biden administration. What a yo-yo back and forth between these two administrations. Ending the DEI programs, and then also officially creating the Department of Government Efficiency led by Elon Musk, now that Vivek has pulled himself out as he's running for, I believe, the governor of Ohio. So a lot of things happening. And to top it all off, TikTok ban delayed by Trump, signing an order postponing the enforcement of the law that would ban TikTok for 75 days. What are your thoughts on all of this blitzering of all these different policies? I mean, feels like they're moving at lightning speed.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like bureaucracy at its core. It feels like acceleration.
Yeah. I mean, the first reaction that I have on here is that, this blitzkrieg is not a reaction, since his election win. This thing's been in process for at least a year. Mar-a-Lago was set up as a 24/7 war room. They brought in folks from the private sector, and they were ready for day one. And whether you agree or disagree with some of the stuff, and some of the stuff, I know that people had some reactions, but the point is, we talk about productivity. This government has come out and basically saying, you want productivity? This is what we're going to do. Agree or disagree, but this is what's going to happen. And what I kind of liked what they did too, there's some very, very complex things in there. They didn't try to say, all right, here's what we're going to do. They've telegraphed it. They've let you know this is where they're going, and they're going to study it. I was concerned that they were going to do some things that you just don't have the requisite data yet,
right,
by not being in government, and you might do some things that are pretty rash. The other observation, I don't know if you've gone through it, but I went through the summaries of all the executive orders, and when they referred to trade or borders, every single reference except for one pointed to Mexico. Canada got the one on securing the terrorist border and the fentanyl, again, which I'm still perplexed on that one. So again, it's been telegraphed to us on, now hopefully it's not February 1 and gives us a little bit more time. But if you looked on the Mexico ones, there is a whole litany of things that they made reference to Mexico. So Canada is in a relatively better position. Let's just not blow it by being arrogant and trying to think that we have massive points of leverage at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty awe-inspiring, first off, to see just how many fast moves they are making, unprecedented for G7 countries.
Yeah.
Their approach is definitely not traditional. It's definitely disrupting the bureaucratic norms and slowdowns we typically see. And I agree with you. Maybe they don't have all the data on what they're doing to make decisions on, but I think they're putting a pause on a lot of things, not actually pushing things forward, besides the things they need to do on like the border and immigration and things. But he's betting on business over government, which is a huge reversal from recent US norms, which is great. And I believe that Canada and maybe Europe should consider a similar approach. I did notice, I listened to that, ramble he had around the questions media was asking him. And then when the Canadian comments came up several times around the tariffs, he actually kind of said it off the cuff, like they shouldn't come earlier than February 1st. He didn't say they will be coming.
Yeah, anyone
maybe starting as early as February 1st, 25% tariffs.
Yeah.
So he was definitely sort of deflecting without giving a solid commitment. And I think that's typical Trump. But that was something I knew the media would pick up right away on. The dollar sank right away. And people said, okay, everything's coming February 1st. But then you go and look at what Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who traveled to Washington, by the way, for the Trump inauguration, pretty good call out for her. She had some pretty good blueprint points that she laid out. She rolled out a 6-point blueprint plan to avoid the tariffs, focusing on scrapping the anti-energy policies at the federal level, fast-tracking canceled pipelines, obviously Northern Gateway and Energy East, tightening immigration to address concerns over illegal drugs and migration, as you just mentioned, boosting defense spending to hit NATO to 2% target, and doubling down on border security with provincial border patrol teams. And then obviously there's a lot of other things she put in there in terms of exchanging of goods and purchasing of Canadian oil to affect the trade deficits. But here's the thing. She's going out on her own.
I know.
And making these points, which is exactly what I said would happen. And I'm glad she's doing it.
Yeah. The only problem is that does it trade off against other provinces?
But the other provinces are trading off her.
Yeah. No, fair point. But the reason why she's doing that is that we have an extremely weak federal government that's dithering.
Of course.
They're going to be attacking each other. They're going half-cocked at this point. They never expected to have these sort of reactions. So yes, she's filling a void that's been created from a lack of leadership, and it's extraordinarily frustrating.
Absolutely. The federal government is meeting in Montebello preparing its own strategy to stand united, as Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says. And I think the problem that obviously, Premier Danielle Smith have is like, everyone, you're using Alberta as your leverage point here to get against Trump. And we don't want to be a part of that because we don't benefit.
It is the leverage
It is
point.
the leverage point. So I don't blame her for going out on her own.
Just to repeat again, there's only 3 leverage points that we have. And despite all of the rhetoric that you hear, you want to believe we have more. It is access to carbon-based energies. What was interesting? Did you see the attack on Venezuela?
Absolutely.
Well, what's the other side of that? The United States needs about 6 billion barrels of oil a day to fulfill their consumption. Take it away from Venezuela, comes from Canada. Beautiful.
Absolutely. Beautiful leverage.
Number 2 is the minerals and resources. Again, now that's where Ontario and some of the prairie provinces can play a very good role. And then the third thing is the coordinated defense. Of course, that's why they want, the discussions around Greenland. That's what the U.S. is thinking about. But those are the 3 leverage points. And you deal with those 3 leverage points properly. And I agree with you, the biggest one being the carbon-based energies. Then we could look to see what the U.S. is really doing. And the big thing that people should understand is the statement of those 5 individuals that were basically standing right next to Trump. It's basically the United States wants to drive their economy from a digital economy perspective, and it's tied into national security. That is the direction. That's what's being tagged. And in Canada, ultimately, that's going to need to be our future as well. But we don't have those leverage points today. So that's the big messaging that I saw from this.
Yeah, I think what other thing I would love to hear your take on is, you've got this day one aggressive agenda that you said to yourself, Mar-a-Lago was turned into a 24/7 war room a year in advance of this, knowing they would have to put a lot of plans in place day one. Where is the 24/7 Mar-a-Lago war room right now for the Conservatives? What are they planning on moving fast on day one? And why are there not more business leaders being vocal about this inside of the Conservative Party right now? Because it doesn't seem like they're surrounding themselves with that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the big question on here. When you start up with a transition team, it seems that Trump started his transition team approximately a year beforehand. So whoever thinks they're going to be running the next federal government needs to go a year beforehand. If there is a spring election, hopefully that means that they should have started in May of last year. These are not easy things to do. And also, they got a lot of volunteers and a lot of folks that were scraping data like crazy to actually calculate and do things. It is a massive grind, and I am concerned that day one comes for Canada, and then we start a process. But by that time, is the U.S. in particular wreaking havoc on our economy because we're not really ready?
Yeah, I really hope that the government is getting ready for that transition much faster than...
And there's a lot of volunteers.
There's a lot of volunteers. We know a lot of people have put their hand up.
I have never seen this before.
No,
I've never seen the private sector reaching out. And it's not about, the criticism. Oh, yes, they're wiring it for themselves. And you know what? It just drives me. A lot of these are looking at it. I love Canada. I want Canada to be an amazing place. And these are the things that must happen in order for us to have a long-term, viable financial future. And anyways, it is anxiety inducing.
It definitely is. Another thing that's a little anxiety inducing is all of these people putting their hands up now to rebuild the Liberal Party and really focus on the economy. What are your thoughts on how this messaging has completely changed? I mean, Chrystia Freeland has completely thrown her former boss under the bus many times on this media circuit, saying she was just doing what she was told between the carbon tax, which she adamantly defended, between the budget and all the other things that she was focused on, saying that it wasn't her really decision-making at the end of the day. And then Carney obviously coming out and saying his pieces on what he thinks we should be doing better in Canada from the Liberal perspective with the economy. What is this a distraction right now? Yeah, I mean, I know they have to do it. They have to find a new leader.
Yeah.
But it feels like a complete distraction.
Well, they have to do it, and I get that completely, but it's like the internet doesn't exist.
Like they're still playing the old media game.
Folks, only 4 weeks ago, 3 of those leaders, being Freeland, Carney, and Gould, are all now saying maybe we should reverse the carbon tax, at least the retail portion of the carbon tax, the capital gains tax, and other, it was interesting. One of those three actually said, we need to fix our economy. That's funny because only 4 weeks ago, you said there was no fixing and everything is on track. It's almost like we're in bizarro world of it's okay to say something to the effect of, you know what? We thought this was something that was helpful. But we're realizing that, in fact, it's had the opposite effect. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, no, we never believed on that yet. Not only were you all a part of it, and they were architects of it, and now they're viewing the Canadian public as fools. Now, for folks who don't want to vote for the Conservatives, it's a convenient way to say, you see, everything's different, and look, they're doing the same things that Pierre is doing, so you might as well vote for them. But I don't think the public will buy it, and but it is rather amusing that all people are doing is just reposting interviews and etc. just said not that long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. The saying, what happens in Vegas stays on Vegas. Well, what happens on the internet stays on the internet.
Guess what, folks? It's there. It's there for all to see, and it's not fake news.
You'll get called out pretty quickly. You can't edit that out. I don't want to focus on politics the entire time, John, so I want to switch gears on something we talked about probably a couple of weeks ago, but is continuing to see momentum. We're seeing rounds being done in more of these private equity style roll-ups in venture capital. Firms are boring the private equity playbook, creating these roll-up strategies. And instead of just investing in a single startup, they're acquiring multiple service-oriented competitors and merging them into a streamlined business with AI, obviously powering the back end. So we've got some big name firms like General Catalyst who are incubating ideas and created a new company called Long Lake, which is a homeowners roll-up strategy, HOA. Crescendo is doing a call center roll-up. 8BC is back Loop to buy older freight payment providers. Thrive Capital and Bessemer investing and accounting firm roll-up strategies, and the list goes on. Even Jeffrey Katzenberg from Wanderco acquired an old call center. So this is happening more and more. We're seeing former CTOs of traditional SaaS companies or platforms spin out and get backing with $25, $50 million to go out and do these roll-up strategies. What are your thoughts on this? Is it super disruptive to the traditional VC investment world? And how do you think this intersects with what the private equity guys were hoping to do on their own, but are maybe not as fast as the VCs at getting AI implemented?
Yeah, I mean, is this thing here like new and stuff? No, it's like these roll-up strategies have been going on for a long time. But you're absolutely right. It is interesting that it's becoming not, and it used to be the purview of either buyout private equity or growth private equity firms, but not for venture firms. That's kind of the newness of it. Two observations. B, are some of the VCs, particularly who've raised a lot of capital, running out of deployable ideas, particularly out of purely AI startup, number one. Number two, and I think this is something that you, Matt, had talked about. There is a number of zombies out there. And when you say zombies, really what we mean is you're still going to survive. You're still walking around. You're probably, cash flow break even or slightly EBITDA positive. Your growth is very mediocre, but you're a viable company. Well, what if you string a few of these together, cut out the costs, and overlay, an AI or whatever strategy? You've seen these more in a corporate context, again, variations of the Constellation software model or the Valsoft model. But now you're having the VCs looking at that and saying, let's put some of these zombies here together in these industries that are not very sexy and overlay the AI because they understand the AI. That's interesting to me. But I'm not sure it's anything that, hasn't been around in one form or another, for a long time, but maybe the characters have changed.
Yeah, like we're obviously seeing this in our own portfolio of companies that we back at the very early stage, servicing some of these legacy industries like logistics, freight, healthcare, insurance, supply chains, things like that. But I think where this model may not be able to return the same amount of capital, one, you can't put as much money into these things as typical startups are because there is a limit to how much they can grow servicing some of these legacy industries. And two, the margin profile can improve up to some point, but there still is physical parts of the business that can't be changed that need to be involved in the real world. So yes, a call center can handle a lot more calls through one AI system rather than having all these distributed call centers across the United States and physical locations. But there's no moat to that anymore. Like this technology is becoming totally democratized and accessible to everyone. So you're betting on one thing is your commodity of capital gets you in the door first. And two is you have first mover advantage in buying some of these services. But eventually the cost you can charge on the top line will also go down. So even though your margins go up, the cost that you can charge, because people are going to realize, hey, your underlying COGS are a lot cheaper now. I'm going to drive down the price on what I used to pay you.
Yeah, it's commoditizing.
This is like the Costco model, right? Costco goes around to all their suppliers and says, hey, we know that your input cost and what you charge us have gone down. We want a 10% reduction as well. We study the supply chain.
And Matt, it would be interesting to see some of these venture-driven roll-ups. Exactly what you just said. As it commoditizes, will they be introducing debt leverage? Because the cost of capital is so high. And so you put in a little bit of equity capital, debt leverage, and then you kind of go, hey, isn't that the private equity model?
It cannibalizes themselves, right? It cannibalizes the VC need for providing that initial capital. If cheaper capital, it all comes back to the efficiency of what capital you need to start the business. The reason SaaS was so good is because the growth matched the margin profile, and you can put a little in to get it started. If you need a lot to get started and the growth's not there, or you're buying the growth, but then the cheaper capital is available, you're not going to take more capital from a General Catalyst who have billions of dollars that they need to invest. So we'll have to see how this one plays out. But thanks for joining us to Tank today, John, as always.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tank Talks. We hope you found today's conversation as insightful as we did. If you're enjoying the show, we've got 3 quick things to ask of you. First, hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or YouTube. Next, follow us and stay up to date on upcoming episodes and behind-the-scenes content on social media with Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And lastly, share the love. If you found value in today's episode, share with a friend or colleague who'd benefit too. Your support helps us bring in more amazing guests and keeps the Tank Talks engine running. That's it for today. Until next time, keep disrupting and innovating.